Help support AMTV by becoming a patron, an AMTV staff member, and following us over on Twitter.
Hi there guys, it's Adam Martyn here, and welcome back to another video, the first where you're seeing me in the new studio, as it were. Apologies for the stark white background behind me. It's not going to be like that forever. There are going to be some additions, some changes. If you're new to the loop, I've also recently moved house, hence the different backdrop. So as you can imagine, myself and Rebecca, we're still getting used to everything. We're still getting everything as we want it, and that includes putting things on the wall or those little personal details, etc, etc. But today we're going to be talking about Doctor Who. Specifically, it's that time again. We've got a release of a brand new Blu-ray collection, namely this one. This is Doctor Who The Collection Season 7, which was Jon Pertwee's first season as the Third Doctor, broadcast in 1970, and perhaps the most crucially, it was the first Doctor Who season to be broadcast in colour. It's a momentous season for many occasions behind the scenes as well, how this was literally the last chance saloon for the show at the time to avoid cancellation, and I think it's fair to say amongst Doctor Who fans, this season often ranks highly amongst not just Classic Who, but all of Doctor Who in general. And I know for me, personally, as a fan of Doctor Who, coming up to 20 years this year, which is pretty crazy, as a fan, I can hand on heart say that this, Season 7, is perhaps my all-time favourite season of classic Doctor Who, hands down. It has some close contenders, but there's just something about this season. It's radically different from anything else in the show's history for several reasons, which I'll talk about a bit later. But let's get into the meat and potatoes. Let's unbox this brand new Blu-ray set and see what treasures are on the inside. Okay, so here we are, the box set itself, Season 7. And first of all, look at this artwork. As ever, it's been designed by the fabulous Lee Binding, who has helmed all of these. And what a perfect amalgamation of the Third Doctor's first run of stories this is. You've got Jon Pertwee himself looking absolutely resplendent and marvellous here on the cover. I love the blends of green and oranges as well, and the pinks and the reds. I'm all for like wonderful colour blends, and honestly, Lee just nails it every single time, so props to him. He's holding one of the Nestine's orbs there from Spearhead from Space. You can see the monsters that he comes up against as well. You've got an Auton at the top there. You've got a Silurian to the right, one of the ambassadors, the astronauts from the left, and a Primord from Inferno at the bottom there. It's rated PG. There's 7 discs of this, and again, it's just a marvelous cover, as these always are. Now here's the spine as well. As always, this is the limited edition release. They are a bit chunkier. It's going to take up more space on your shelf. There are the standard editions of these sets. I've talked about a few of these before, how they're not as wide, they're a bit slimmer, they're going to take up less space. But just to let you know, with Season 7, it's going to take at least a couple of years before we ever see that, if they continue that model. Flicking it on over to the back then, it says, continue your Doctor Who archive with the Ultimate Collector's Set. It lists the 4 stories, namely Spearhead from Space, Doctor Who and the Silurians, the Ambassadors of Death, and Inferno. All 25 episodes newly restored for Blu-ray and packed with extra material. And you can get a little eye on this here. It includes new documentaries, a few of them actually, Terror of the Suburbs, Lucky 13, Looking for Mac, Splendid Chap, The Life and Times of Nicholas Courtney. You've got a new In Conversation feature with John Levine, who played Sergeant Benton. You've got more installments of Behind the Sofa. The teams this time, you've got Katie Manning with Matthew Waterhouse. You've got Janet Fielding, Sarah Sutton, and Sophie Aldred. And you have Toby Haydock, Daisy Ashford, who is the daughter of Caroline John, who played Liz, and her husband, Geoffrey Beavers, who also played the Master, and still does for Big Finish. You've got the Doctor Escape Room, movie editions of certain stories, archive treats, the trailer for the Blu-ray, PDF written archive, and much more, including a boatload of stuff that was previously on the DVDs, as you'd expect. And we'll get more into the special features as we go through this box set. Some I've seen online say, oh, there's not as much sort of advertised as special feature-wise than there has been on other sets. And I think we have to be a little forgiving here. For one, there is still hours upon hours and hours worth of content outside of the episodes alone that's going to keep you busy. But also, you know, this season originally came out in 1970. That's 55 years ago. And in terms of, you know, new documentaries with original contributors, there's not many of those original contributors left. In fact, the main TARDIS team, if you want to call it that for this year, they've all sadly passed, you know. So they have to get a bit more creative with what they can include on here. And I'm absolutely all for that. I mean, again, this is my favorite season. I'd be happy if it was just restored episodes alone. Do you know what I mean? Just taking off the little J card, here is an image of the front cover without any text. And again, just a wonderful, beautiful piece of artwork. I've always said you could have these framed, and I'm sure some fans probably have done, let's face it. And there you've got the TARDIS, presumably crashing out of the time vortex as it's being exiled to Earth. Lovely shot there. Let's open her up then. Let's see what we've got here. As mentioned, it is 7 discs. Disc 1 is for Spearhead from Space. Discs 2 and 3 cover Doctor Who and the Silurians. We'll talk about what's on the contents in a little bit. Disc 4 is for the Ambassadors of Death. And discs 5 and 6 are for Inferno. Disc 7 technically is as well, but I think of that as more of a bonus disc. In fact, it does say more bonus on it. And if you remove it, you can see a lovely image of Jon Pertwee's face there amongst the title sequence for this season. So that is how the stories are spaced out via discs. 1 for Spearhead from Space, 2 for the Silurians, 1 for Ambassadors of Death, and 2, technically 3, for Inferno. On the left there, the bit of artwork we have this time is, I mean, what else could it have been? When you have the TARDIS at the centre, it has to be the third Doctor, newly regenerated, stumbling from its doors, exiled to Earth. Wonderful stuff there. Love the colour palette of this as well. When you open this up, you have a lovely shot there of the Doctor, the Brig, and Liz entering the caves with the Silurians waiting for them. And then you also get a picture of where the Doctor's TARDIS is this season. Being exiled to Earth, you know, he's not really using the TARDIS to travel as such. So I love this sort of imagery we get here. Very 1970s-esque, but this is what it was at the time. And as always, we get a little booklet as well, which is full of information about the production, the original transmission of these episodes, the behind the scenes. You've got a lovely promotional image of Jon there with some monsters, including the Yeti and a Cyberman who aren't in this season. Spearhead from Space, as you can see, there's various audio commentaries, there's a making-of documentary, there's a wonderful biography of Jon Pertwee, a dandy and a clown. Highly recommend watching that. You've got title sequence tests, continuities, all that good stuff. And as well as the information that is in these booklets, you get some lovely images as well. Some of them promotional photos, some of them have been designed from scratch of characters and scenes from this season. It's really great to see. Doctor Who and the Silurians then, Disc 2, you've got things like the Behind the Sofa, a design featurette, location featurette. Disc 3 is the meat of this. You've got a 90-minute version of the story, which is great to see, exclusive to this Blu-ray. You've also got 2 of those new documentaries, including a look at Nicholas Courtney and Malcolm Hulke as well, who was one of the prolific writers throughout the Third Doctor's era. More stunning photos and original art here before we get to the Ambassadors of Death, which has its making of course, a few featurettes there, continuity. Not so much new stuff on here, but again, I think that's totally understandable, especially for a season this old. And then we get on to Inferno. So Disc 5 has an extended episode 5, which has the deleted scene, which can be watched on its own as well. There's the making of on there. Disc 6 has a 90-minute version of Inferno, which I'd be very curious to see how you can trim it down to that length. You've got a featurette on the Unit family, part 1 at least. You've got a documentary on Caroline John, stunts documentary, standard definition episodes from the NTSC tapes, which is an interesting inclusion. And the final disc, you have an In Conversation with John Levine, as we mentioned, the Terror of the Suburbs documentary, the Doctor Who Escape Room, Lucky 13, or a load of those new features are included here on Disc 7. And that brings you to the end. There's a lovely colorized picture there of Nicholas Courtney as the brigade leader, with some more lovely photos and artwork before we draw this booklet to a close. Now on the back you get the cave monster here, like the dragon/dinosaur looking guy here. Now most of these booklets, interestingly enough, usually have BBC autograph cards at the time featuring the actors, so I was expecting to see one of Jon Pertwee and Caroline John. Not really sure why that isn't here. Maybe they didn't exist, but I'd like to think they exist back then. But no, we get this boy instead. And I wonder if this trend's going to continue with future releases when it comes to the back of the booklet. It's a small detail, but one that's, you know, one that as Doctor Who fans, that'll always be noticed. So that is the meat and potatoes of what is on each disc, but let's just talk about these stories for a second. As mentioned, Season 7, in my opinion, is just glorious. Spearhead from Space is one of the most perfect openers to a new Doctor you can find. You've got a great villain in the Autons and the Nestine behind them. Jon Pertwee immediately inhabits the role. You've got all the stuff with Unit going on, Caroline John as Liz. It's all shot on film as well, so it looks even better in HD. It's just a wonderful opening story. The Silurians, or Doctor Who and the Silurians, again, really great introduction for this monster that has featured countless times now over the decades. Really great writing from Malcolm Hulke, great acting from all involved. And this really is, catalyzing what Doctor Who was in 1970. It was this show that was a bit more adult, a bit more mature, a bit more willing to deal with, more difficult concepts in a more difficult way. The Ambassadors of Death is a favourite of mine. I know it's not to everybody. Some say it's too long, like a lot of this season, as people say. But I don't know. There's something about the Ambassadors of Death that's very comforting to watch. It's a very enjoyable watch. I find it quite tense, quite exciting. There's a lot of potentially frightening moments in it as well. And Inferno is just quite simply one of the best Doctor Who stories of all time. That's all you can really say about it. It just is. Right from the word go, the parallel universe aspect, the drilling to the Earth's core. I've watched this story with, sometimes by myself, sometimes with friends who are Who fans. What I love, though, is watching Inferno with people who aren't as familiar with classic Who. And every time I've done that, no matter who it is, they have loved it. And it's truly wonderful. You deserve to go and watch it if you haven't seen it already. As I mentioned at the start, this season was important for several reasons. It basically guaranteed Doctor Who's future by it being a success. It brought the show into the world of colour television, which was still, broadly being introduced across the UK by 1970. There's a whole bunch of reasons why this season is so important that I couldn't really fit into this unboxing. But if you go and buy this set, you can probably learn about it all in the documentaries and the behind the scenes, or even the information provided in the booklet. Well, there you have it. That's Season 7 as a Blu-ray package. Now, as always with these more limited edition box sets, the price is going to be a little bit higher. I pre-ordered mine from HMV, as I always tend to do. You can get yours from there. You can also get it from other places as well, such as Amazon, maybe Zavi, places like that. But HMV tends to be what I go for. It retails for between, say, £50 and £55, depending on where you get it from. So that's the factor you've got to consider. No doubt 2 years down the line or so, maybe in 2027, a standard edition of this will come out where you get it in a slimmer Blu-ray case. It won't be as wide as this. It'll be easier to store on your shelf. But again, it's likely that's going to come in a couple of years' time and it will be cheaper. But for the meantime, this is the only way you can get the entirety of Season 7 on Blu-ray. I love it. As I've said, it's my all-time favourite Classic Who season for a whole number of reasons. And I'm just glad we've got it as part of the collection range because, I don't know, maybe because of the colour transfers and stuff like that, I thought this would take years before this came out, like way longer than we've actually had to wait for. So really glad it's here. I was easily going to pick it up. You should pick it up as well. Season 7 on Blu-ray. If you enjoyed this, please leave a like on it. It really does help us out. And subscribe as well. We'd really love to have you aboard. Let me know in the comments down below as well. Did you pick up Season 7 for yourself? Are you adding it to your collection? Are you going to wait for a standard edition if that comes in a couple of years? Or did you pass on it entirely? Let me know all your range of thoughts in the comments down below. In the meantime, I've been Adam Martyn from AMTV. Thank you for joining me. And I'll see you next time.
Dr. John Smith.
Doctor Who, The Collection, Season 7.
Thank you to our patrons for helping to support the show, and a special thank you to Macra, Sean Knock, Dord Khan, Ethan Carberry-Holt, Liam Domain, AJ Mac 200017, Deck, Jen, Traffy, Evanhart 41 Radio, Tim Ripley, Mr. Eurovision 1986, Monanel Thurman, John Wakefield, 40-something Manchild, Jerry Ralph, John McLeod, James Wallace, Ben, Kat Hegarty, Stephen Oliver, Tegan, Shadowfiend 180X, Swan Ronson, Fonzie Daz, Real Random, and Seraphic Euphoria, our AMTV staff members.